Hello there, I'm Julio. I would like to introduce you my new tool called Magic Coordinate that allows Look development artists to use a same material, same procedural smart material to multiple objects at the same time efficiently. So it works with some procedural modeling techniques by the use of modifiers like Solidify, Bevel, Mirror, and it also works with animated characters. Yes, it's going to be a little bit technical, but I will try my best, to showcase you how the most common texture coordinates work and their pros and cons, and how Magic Coordinate allows you to converge the best of each coordinate and give you a very streamlined and efficient workflow. I made this workflow especially for people that like to skip in UVs, for example, so I hope you are not the person that likes doing UVs, right? Someone likes doing UVs here? I hope not. Let's assign this material to multiple objects and, okay, just before I proceed, let's do the following exercise. Let's imagine that this is going to be our first time assigning materials to multiple objects in Blender, okay? There are two things that I would expect if that was my first time. The first was like the texture would be consistent. The proportion and the scale would be consistent across all my objects that receive this material. And the second one, my animated characters that distort, that are deformed, the texture would follow these transformations and give me the impression that the texture is applied, attached to the surface. Okay? And let's see how the object coordinate works. I'm going to apply for all these objects here a simple Voronoi cells texture. It's colorful, it's very helpful to visualize what's going on. And does my texture look consistent across all these objects? I don't think so. Okay, let's fix that. This one, it's having a scale 1/3, so we have this distortion because you needed to press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Let's do the same for this guy. But something did not work here. Now the object suddenly changed the shape as soon as I did that. That's because this object right here is being generated by some procedural, modifiers like Solidify, for example, and they, at this point in time, they are relative to the scale of the object. And if you change the scale by applying it, these values are now deprecated. They have to be counterbalanced to achieve the same kind of looking. That's a lot of reworking and a lot of technical knowledge required to just have this. What about my animated character? Let's do the same for it. Let's bring this, let's apply the same material. And let's hit play. Oh no, we are not going anywhere here. Now the texture does not look, attached to the surface. The objects are not moving at all. What moves is the geometry that compose the objects are moving through the object texture coordinate space. The mesh, not the object. So it will never work. So forget about that. Okay, I'm enough with this object coordinate. It's probably useful in 1 or 2 cases as soon as you understand that. So let's now apply the generated coordinate and see what happens. Oh well, now I see a lot of distortion going on. So what about this guy? Remember, let's apply the scale and nothing changed. I applied the scale, but my texture did not get corrected. That's because the generated coordinate is not dependent on object level scale. It is dependent on the bounding box of each object. Let me show you what a bounding box actually is. So let me bring my bounding box. Do you see this orange box caging my inner box? That's the bounding box. It is the minimum space required to cage your mesh. What happened is the generated use this box mapped from 0 to 1 in all the 3 directions. And if my objects end up to have not even proportions, it's still going to map that from 0 to 1, which causes this stretching. Look at this guy. We have so much inconsistency in scale, you know. Let's hit play and see what happens. Okay. I think that's one expectation achieved. I see my texture, you know, attached to the surface and it distorts with the object. That's very good. But how I fix the scaling issue now? What I used to do is I was going to like separate each of these objects into its own material, adding a new mapping here and undistort everything manually, which is going to create a massive amount of, you know, redundant materials in your project, which makes the project, you know, very, very hard to maintain, and it gets slow because you have more nodes networking being, you know, computed in the background. So it's not ideal. Don't do that. You actually don't have to do that anymore, because I'm going to show you the solution. And yes, some other, you know, experienced users would suggest me, Julio, why don't you use the rest position attribute? Rest position what? Yes, there is a rest position attribute that was added not long time ago in Blender. I think they added that when they started introducing the new hair system. So you can go to the Object Data tab, and I'm going to hold Alt and press this button here in the Shape Keys section, Add Rest Position. Nothing happened yet because you are going to have to add a node called Attribute, and we are going to type here rest underline position, and let's use that as our input texture coordinate. And let's hit play. I think this is one of the best solutions until now. I see some potential, but if I look a little bit closer, something is not going well here. Why is that? Well, take a look on the tooltip description. The rest position is a copy of the position attribute before shape keys and modifiers are evaluated, which means they will never interact with things that are happening here in the modifier stage. For example, the thickness of the solidify, which creates this virtual geometry here, will never get mapped, and you're going to see this stretching here. These lines infinitely stretched. Taking a look on my character here, there are many mirror modifiers. Do you see how they get flipped? Let me isolate this object, and you're going to see that the texture is a copy of the other side. Yes, this solution, it was good, but it does not work with procedural modeling workflows. Now it's time to show the magic coordinate in action. That's going to take each one of these, you know, potentials in each coordinate and converge everything into a single streamlined solution. Let's revert this file back to the initial and let me showcase the workflow. Select your objects, and we are going to assign our material for all these objects here, and we are going to hit a button in the set magic coordinate. This is going to add a modifier called set magic coordinate that creates an attribute that can be used by the node group called get magic coordinate, which can be used as an input texture coordinate. All right, I see some potential going on here. What about my animated character? Let's bring it. Let's select all these objects and let's assign the same material. It turned pink because it still does not have the modifier. Select the objects, hit magic coordinate, and let's hit play. Voila! Finally! Do you see? Remember, my expectations would be two: textures, consistency in scale and proportions, and it works for animated characters. That's the magic coordinate in action. So it takes the best of each world and converts everything into a single world, a new workflow, a new way to approach and take the best of your procedural and smart materials. It does other things on top of that. Do you see how the scale is not even for this object? And it actually doesn't matter. You can have any weird transformations in scale here, but the texture will never get stretched, unless if you want to do that. If you want to do that, you can use the parameters here on the modifier and do the stretching you want. You can break consistency when intended, right? That's the point. And also it's going to help you, to offset your texture for specific positions if you want. If you want to slide or rotate your texture, you can do that without forking your material into new one, which prevents you to have, tons of redundant materials in your project. It's very important. So, but, yes, there is always a but. Nothing is perfect in life. I want to tell you that unless you are going to have some shape keys transformations happening in your geometry. So do you see how the texture does not deform accordingly when the shape key is moving? Well, it's because the set magic coordinate, or the coordinates used, they are created after shape keys. If you want to use shape keys, you're going to have to click this button called Shape Key Support, which is going to make your texture behave just like the generated coordinate, which it's very distorted. So you can use these values here, to counterbalance this stretching, this scale, as you want. Try to achieve the same scale as the other ones. And now you have the support for the shape keys. All right? But you don't have to fork your material. You don't have to create a new material. Everything here that you see in the screen is sharing the same material. All right? As you can see. That's basically it. So in the next video, let's take a look how the process of look development can become much more simple and smooth. I see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.